I'm delighted to formally welcome everyone to this webinar on treating vulnerable customers fairly. I'm delighted to be joined by Helen Pettifer. Helen, would you like to explain to the audience what a vulnerable customer trainer and consultant is?
Yes, of course. Good afternoon, everyone. So I work with all organisations across all sectors, and predominantly at the moment regulators, financial services. I support them in making sure they've got their strategy in place, their processes, they've got the policies, all of those vital things that underpin the training, and then I put the icing on the top and train their teams to be able to carry out those processes and policies.
Well, lovely to have you with us today. I'm also delighted to be joined by Richard Bassett from NICE International. Richard, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience as well?
Yeah, hello everyone. So Richard Bassett, and I lead all the digital and all the analytics for NICE across our international business. If you don't know who NICE are, then NICE came from a contact center world, workforce management, call recording. We do the voice, we do the digital, we do the analytics, and we'll talk about some of that today. But really good to be here.
Brilliant, lovely to have you with us. Okay, just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. We're in the Zoom chat room today, and you can find the chat button in the bottom of your screen and join the discussion in our chat room. And just a reminder that there will be a replay and slides available for the webinar, and you can find them later on this afternoon at www.callcenterhelper.com/articles/recorded webinars. For those joining everyone in the chat room today, we're also doing a gift card for the best tip. So if you've got a question, it's #question and #tip for a tip, and we'll be coming to those later on today. And we're now going to start with a quick poll on: do you cover vulnerable customers in your induction training? If you bear with me one moment, I'll just get that started. So everyone should now be able to see the poll. Just a reminder, do you cover vulnerable customers in your induction training? Yes, no, or planning it? Just while everyone's filling that out, Helen, what do you expect to see here?
Ideally, I'd like to say yes. It's all in hand. That would be the ideal solution. But it does depend on actually what is covered in vulnerable customers, how in depth it goes, and not overwhelming teams when they, team members when they first start with an organisation. They have a lot to take in.
Okay, well, I'm just going to end that poll and share the results. Okay, so as you can see, nice result on the yes, that 51% of people are saying yes, they are covering it. 28% are also planning it, so quite an optimistic picture really, but still 21% are saying no, that it's not covered at all. So Helen, what that no, that 21% of people, how concerning is that?
I think that is quite concerning, whether it is going to be on the agenda. Maybe it's not in this financial year, maybe it's in the budget for next year. Hopefully by the end of my presentation they will have changed their minds, whether if we were to launch it again at the end, whether there'd be more people planning it. That would be interesting to see.
Yes, it would, wouldn't it? I just stop sharing that now. Okay, so we're now going on to your presentation, Helen. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. You should be able to share yours, and I'll hand the baton over to you.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So good afternoon, everybody. I am going to be talking about just a little bit around the consumer duty, and then I'm going to be sharing my thoughts, top tips on the training, and definitely I'd like to encourage you who voted no to put induction training with vulnerable customers definitely on the agenda. So just wanted to start with thinking about the consumer duty there. So I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but these are the two elements that I think are really valuable when it comes to vulnerable customers. So we've got consumer understanding section, and we've got the consumer support section. So I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but it is really starting to think about that customer's understanding. Are they understanding the information that you're giving them? Are they able to read it and understand it? They're very different skills. Research shows that the average reading age of the UK population, including adults, is 9 years old. So we need to be making sure that the information that we're sending in written format, whether that's in documentation, whether that's in emails, it is able to be understood. read and understood. And in a turn, it's going to help people to make effective decisions. And then the other thing I wanted to focus on here was around tailoring communication. It's making sure that that customer has the communication channel, they have the communication format that is going to help them to understand that information. So it could be that you open up more telephony lines. It might be that you start using WhatsApp. I know a lot of organizations are moving down that route. You know, providing information in large print, Braille, anything that is going to help that person to understand the information. And then just to touch on consumer support, this is crucial. These are the two elements that I focus on in my training. We need to be focusing on the customer's needs and the support that they need to meet those needs. So really start to identify, what does that customer need when they are engaging with you? Do they need, like I was saying, large print? Do they need Braille? Do they just need somebody kind and compassionate and empathetic on the phone, someone who's going to listen, someone who's going to take their time to just really understand that customer, and then provide the support. And then just quickly to touch on appropriate friction and unreasonable barriers. I think it's fair to say that a lot of us, we look at customer service, we look at the customer service journey, and then we think, oh, friction points, we need to get rid of as many friction points as possible and make it a smooth journey. However, I want to challenge you and start to think, you know, actually, are there opportunities in the customer journey where you need to add friction points? Maybe it's thinking time, reflecting time, maybe it's processing time for the customers, so that they can take that information away, they can reflect on it, they can process it, they can ask somebody that they trust to talk through it, and then they can make a decision. So look at those two in very different ways. You know, is it a barrier that's stopping that customer doing something? Which could be harmful, or is it a friction point that is appropriate in order to give that customer that little bit of breathing space, that little bit of processing of information space? So there were my key thoughts on the consumer duty and the relevancy to the vulnerable customers. But what I wanted to focus on today, which is my speciality, is around training. Training your team members is vital, absolutely vital, that they have those skills. They know what vulnerability is, how they can identify it. It was interesting that identification came up a couple of times in that chat there. And then once they've identified that vulnerable customer, they know what to do with it. They know what to do with that information. They know what to do with that individual. So the two elements that I want to really highly recommend at induction level and also sort of at annual level, or sort of even more frequently, two different levels there, starting with the foundational vulnerability training. So just those points that I've shared, getting them to understand what vulnerability is, what it looks like, who may be impacted, all those different drivers, health, resilience, capability, life events, you know, those people who are experiencing that, how is it impacting them? And then from there, you can start to pick up on what do they need. In my training, I cover both the emotional needs of the customer, whether they need time to be heard, they need time to process information, whether they need that kind, empathetic agent, or whether it's the practical needs. So whether that is support with managing their finances, looking at different payments solutions, you know, those are the two needs that I focus on in my training. And then from there, you can start to identify what support you need to put in place. That is the foundational level. And I suggest that every single person in the organization who is either engaging directly with the customers or is making key decisions on the customer journey, I suggest that every single one of those people complete that foundational level of training. And then from there, you can maybe start to upskill certain individuals within those teams, maybe their escalation point, maybe they're vulnerable customer champions. I'm hearing those words quite regularly. They would have that higher level of training. So this may include bereavement training. This may include having conversations with customers who are putting their affairs in order for their end of life. They're very difficult questions, very difficult conversations. It may be that you're supporting customers who are having financial difficulty. These are specialist training as well. And then sadly, my most popular course at the moment is Conversations When Suicide is Mentioned. It's really important that you equip your team members to know how to manage those conversations, and also put support in place for when they have finished that conversation with that customer, and how they're going to look after themselves following that. So they're the two levels that I suggest that you put your team members through. And what I really do want to challenge you today is to think outside the classroom. So important. It's not just classroom training that is effective. So when I'm in classroom training, I'm thinking either people in the same room, or whether it's virtual like this. There are so many different ways that you can get that information into your team members. So here's just a few examples on the screen there. I'm a huge fan of lived experiences, hearing directly from people what they've got going on in their life, how it impacts them, and what support they need. Could be you've got team members who are comfortable and happy to share about maybe their lived experiences. Maybe they could record a podcast, maybe they can write a little blog about their situation, maybe do a lunch and learn. But get those lived experiences, even get customers in the room. Tell us, what can we do to better support you? How do we want to, find out more about what you're going through and what you need from us? I'm a huge fan of call listening as well. I think that really does have its place. It can help to pick up on some of the skills and the confidence with team members. I do use the word confidence there. I think that's probably my only take on the FCA's Fair Treatment of Vulnerable Customers guidance that I would change. They use the word skills and capability. I would change that to skills and confidence. We need to be skilling the team members, but we also need to be giving them the confidence to be having these conversations, confidence to know when to step outside the process. So really key. So during those call listening, think about the skills, but also think about the confidence. How confident is that team member in having that conversation with the customer? We typically think of call listening as room for improvement and room for training, but also don't forget to celebrate and compliment that agent on the call that they've taken. Boost their sort of confidence and let them know when they have done a job well done. That's just equally as important. Thinking about brainstorming, I'm a huge fan of flip chart paper, coloured pens, post-it notes, you name it, anything visual, I'm there. Get people around the room, around the table, and set them some challenges. Right, okay, what do we need to identify in a conversation? What are we likely to pick up? Think about words and phrases that customer might say. What might their voice tell us? What can we get, information can we get from what's going on in the background? Get these team members getting around a piece of paper and sharing their thoughts. They're likely to learn more from that, and then it starts discussions and they share experiences. I'm also a huge fan of blended learning. Everybody learns very differently. Not everyone is a classroom-based learner. Think outside the box. Can you get podcast episodes shared with the team members? What about YouTube? YouTube is a huge suite of fantastic videos on that. I use YouTube videos in my training all the time. It's a fantastic resource. Get those videos shared around and start those discussions. Books, research. Charities are often putting out research papers, stats, information. Share that with your teams and start those conversations. Games and training. Again, people learn in different ways. Can you bring to life any games, any training aids, or even activities, anything that is going to bring that individual, that customer, that training to life? I've got a couple of examples I'm going to share with you shortly. And then a conversation I've been having with a lot of clients recently is, should we be bringing to life personas? My suggestion is yes, because it helps to bring your customers to life even more, especially if you're talking to them over the telephone. You know, it can be difficult to put a face to a name. So if you can bring to life some personas, actually give them a photograph or a face, and give them a name, and bring them to life. One of my clients has a character that they've brought to life called Hazel. Hazel is all over the call center. They even have little badges that say, you know, what would Hazel do? What does Hazel need? You know, how would Hazel feel? All of these are fantastic. And they even have a spare chair in the boardroom that's Hazel's chair. So she's in the boardroom and they're making decisions on her. So a huge fan of personas, bring them to life. So, question for you today is, how can you increase your learning in your teams, both in and outside of the classroom? And as I said, I really want to encourage you to bring it to life. Bring these characters to life. So these are just some of the things that I use in my training. The lady on the left of the screen there, I call her Tina. And in my financial difficulty course, when we're supporting customers facing financial difficulty, I bring Tina into the group there. They get her monthly income and they get her monthly expenditure. So they get a whole page with her backstory and all her financial information. And then I start to weave a story. And the people in the training have to then make decisions based on Tina and her circumstances, and then they really do connect with Tina. And at the end of that training exercise, I just throw the question out: how many of you have ever been in Tina's situation? It's amazing how many hands go up. So you know, just bring some characters to life and share their stories. And then just the pictures on the right hand side. I've brought a game to life. It came out. It was launched in January. Spent a year working on it. And it's just a card game, really. 3 sets of cards. I've got my avatar cards, so they're your customers. They're the characters at the top, and then you can start thinking about your process. Choose a character. Think about the process. How does that work for Bam? She's 30. What does the process look like? And then, as the conversation's moving, throw in a couple of health conditions. How does that process work now for Bam? Now that she has a visual impairment and she's living with anxiety. You know, it really starts to change up the conversation. And then you can throw in a couple of life events. You know, poor Bam, but she's got a lot going on. You know, she's you know, her house was burgled yesterday and her partner's just died. So, you know, you can really start to have those conversations. You know, what does Bam need? How is Bam feeling? What do we need to do to be able to support Bam? Does the process work for Bam with everything that she's got going on? So really start to think outside the box. How can you bring that training to life so that people will engage with it, people will connect? Because everyone's gone through health conditions, everyone's gone through life events. We can connect with that. That is the most important thing. And then finally, just thinking about how you can get your team members out into the community. I'm a huge fan of volunteering, getting people out. They're hearing from people directly, lived experiences. They're making a difference. So if you have a volunteering day that you give your team members, make sure that they take it up if they want to. Really encourage them to get out and about into the community. It really does make a difference, and you know, can really boost their self-esteem, their confidence, their knowledge, their awareness. And then when they've done that, get them to come back into the organisation and share what they've learned from that experience. So to wrap up what I wanted to share with you today, thinking about your training, here's a famous quote here. Thinking about your team members. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn. Get them involved in training. Make it interactive, make it relevant, help them to connect. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Helen. That was very insightful, especially I think on the different ways of training people to make sure that it's not just that classroom training, there's different things going on as well to make the message stick.
Yes.
With me, just share my screen again. We are going to go through another poll, I believe. Okay, so this one. Apologies. Okay. So this poll is on what training are you currently delivering in your organisation? So are you doing classroom, call listening, multimedia? So that's looking at podcasts and videos as well, a community involvement and the volunteering side of things, or none at all. Helen, what are you hoping to see here?
Well, I'm hoping definitely no nuns, but it would be fantastic. I mean, I've put it down as a multiple choice because we need to be, doing all sorts of different training. So I'd like to see that there's a mix of all of them.
Okay, well, I'll just end that now and share the results. And as you can see, 88% of people are doing classroom-based training, which is fantastic to see. At least they're covering it off
yes.
regularly. But then you've got 75% also doing call listening, 44% multimedia, leaning into things like podcasts and videos, and 10% looking at community involvement. 3% sadly doing nothing at all, but overall quite a promising picture.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's great that the 97% are doing some training. That's the biggest difference. But it would be great if, we can see more of that community involvement, especially with everything that everyone's experiencing now. We can really get out and support. But yeah, pleased that they're doing that.
Yes. Okay, so we're now going to go over to some top tips and questions that we've had in from the audience. So we've had a question in from Sarah that says, given the imminent introduction of the FCA Consumer Duty, how do you think businesses should adapt their approach to vulnerable customers, particularly the understanding element? Richard, one for you.
Okay, so I think companies are talking about it a lot. I think that they are trying to do the right thing to adapt their approach. But again, it's just what I said earlier about the different priorities that they're having. The understanding, there's a lot of grey areas. A lot of the conversations I have, people don't quite know. When I've had a lot of roundtables, lots of dinners, etc., where we've had different brands in the room and we've asked people what's their understanding, and there's very different understandings across different businesses right now. I think there is a bit of a unknown, uncertainty, grey area behind it. So the way I think they should be adapting it is by speaking to others, a bit like what Helen said about having a community. We do that as a business side as well and help each other share the best practices of what's working, whether it's the agent training, whether it's technology that's helping them do it, etc. So I think there's a number of different approaches that businesses need to take depending on the size and what resources they have available.
Fantastic, and hopefully that answered your question, Sarah. And we've had a tip in from Stacey, perhaps language like any additional needs or preferences. They have to open the dialogue and allow them to think about their scenario, which may lead to informing of their vulnerable situation. Helen, what do you think of this one? Is it about asking those right questions and making agents aware of their language choices?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not putting, are you vulnerable in your sort of documentation.
Yeah.
But it's just thinking, thinking about the language that your customers use, and how they would, they may just say, actually, I might just need some additional support. I might just need a little bit of extra help. So yeah, really start to think about the language that the customers would use when they were approaching you. But it's definitely creating that opportunity, every opportunity you can to get that customer to share.
Fantastic. Okay, we've had another tip in from Mandy. It says, in upsetting situations, make sure you are supporting the staff too, because they may need some time out as well. Richard, how important is this one?
Yeah, it's extremely important. And just, if you look at contact centers in general, which is where I spend a lot of my time, for the average contact center is about a 34% attrition a year at the moment. That's just people attritioning. The agents are at the front line of people who have been on hold for a long time. They're already getting shouted at, and then they have to go through some situations. It's a highly stressful job. And, sometimes we forget that as business leaders, owners, etc., in the contact center. So the staff that are talking to customers, it's really important because, I think we neglect that sometimes. Yeah.
And are you seeing this too, Helen, as people aren't thinking about the stress on the agent. They're just maybe thinking a tick box exercise of what it means for customers and getting the customer experience right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what maybe sort of senior leaders are not realizing is the customers' emotions, customers' feelings, what the customers are experiencing. It's really difficult times for so many people out there, really distressing. And those agents taking those calls, you know, empathy fatigue is a real thing. You know, call agents, you know, they will take on those stresses and those emotions of the customers, and they take them home and play them at 2-3 o'clock in the morning over again in their heads, you know, worrying about that customer. Could they have done more? So we definitely need to be really focusing on our team members.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. We've had another question in from Rachel saying, many of our customers don't recognise that their circumstance is a vulnerability. What's the best way to ask the customer about their vulnerability without using that word? Should we start with you, Helen?
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely just ask, is there anything else you need? Is there any specific support that we can do? Also as well, if you've maybe asked a couple of questions and that customer isn't forthcoming, you can just ask a blanket response. Just sort of, you know, a lot of our customers are finding things really difficult at the moment with what's going on. We've put a lot of support options in place. If at any time during the call you want me to share about those support options, I'm happy to do that. Just let me know.
That's a really nice way of putting it. And Richard, do you have anything else to add on this one?
I don't. I think Helen just answered that extremely well on both of the examples she gave. So yeah, well done.
Fantastic. I think we've just got time for 1 or 2 more tips before we move on. So a tip that's coming from Tina says, start out by recognising your team members daily. Ensure they are equipped with everything they need to have a successful day, and ensure you are available if needed. And we've also had another tip in saying doing mock scenarios and role play works really well to reinforce and put into practice the learning and evidences and the impact of the training. Okay, so we'll come back to some more tips and questions later on, but for now we're just going to jump into another poll. Bear with me 1 second while I just get that launched. Okay. So you should all now be able to see this one as, do you have a vulnerable customer policy in your contact centre? And that's yes, no, planning it, or haven't thought of it. Richard, what are you expecting to see here?
Sorry, I was on mute. I think I'm expecting to see a lot of people are planning it at the moment.
Okay.
I think some people think they've got it, but I'll be interested to, see what people come up with, and
hopefully a positive picture.
So
I'll end that poll. No, I'll wait for one more person. There we go. Yep, so I'll end the poll and share the results. I would say this is actually quite a positive picture overall, that 60% of people are saying they do have a vulnerable customer policy in place. And as you were saying, a lot of people are planning it as well. It's 18% they're planning, but 17% saying no, although fortunately 0% haven't thought of it at all. So that's quite promising to see. At least it's front of mind for most people now. So Richard, is there anything you'd like to comment on this one at all?
No, I'll go through in a moment about how we're seeing, and we speak to a lot of customers who have been on a journey to do it, and then what they're doing, and how to take it to the next level is really what we're trying to add value behind, is going across 100% of interactions. That's really what our bottom line is at the end of the day. If people are doing it, I'd be interested to see if it was 3%, 5%, 100%. Another question for another time.
Okay, well, it's now time to pass the baton over to you, Richard, for your presentation. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and you should be able to share your slides.
Okay, let me do that now. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, all looks great.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll go straight into it. So what I wanted to cover today was just a few points. I've got something that's hovering over. There we go. So we're going to talk about who are vulnerable customers, the rise in vulnerability that we're seeing right now. What is consumer duty? The expectations for firms, for brands, the challenges of managing today's vulnerable customers, how analytics can help and what we're doing around that, an example of someone who's using us at scale to do this, and really what they were seeing before versus, after putting technology in place and AI in place to help support them. And then just really, the advantage that we're bringing to the table right now. I'll just mention in advance that I'm in a room where the lights turn off every sort of 5 minutes if I don't move too much. So if it goes dark for a second, I'll wave my arms, but please, nobody has to worry. So we'll kick off. So let's talk with, who are vulnerable customers? And if we look at the FCA and, how they define it, a vulnerable customer is someone who, due to their personal circumstances, is especially susceptible to harm, particularly when a firm is not acting with appropriate levels of care. And the drivers, come under 4 categories. The first one being health. So that's physical as well as the mental health issues, covering a wide range of illness or health conditions that affect someone's ability to carry out day-to-day tasks. You've also got then the life events, major life events such as bereavement, job loss, relationship breakdown, etc. You've got resilience, the low ability to withstand financial and emotional shocks, and then you've got capability as well. So low knowledge of the financial matters or low confidence in managing money. And other areas include literacy issues or limited digital skills as an example. So there's certainly a rise in vulnerability of our customers right now, and we hear about it every day. We turn on the news and we see it, we hear it. We speak to our friends, we speak to our family, and it's a constant conversation. And if you look at the slide I just put up, 47% of UK adults showed that one or more characteristics of vulnerability. And as per some of the FCA reports last year, 60% of all UK adults, about 32 million of us, were finding it a heavy burden to keep up their bills due to this recent increase in the cost of living. And this has led to high stress, high anxiety, and that's increased significantly, since pre-pandemic. So what is consumer duty? The FCA's consumer duty mandates requiring regulated firms to, number one, act in good faith towards retail customers, avoid causing foreseeable harm to these retail customers. Firms must enable and support retailers to pursue their financial objectives. Consumer duty is defined as a principle intended to drive conduct and culture and standards of behaviour that the FCA expects from firms. So basically, firms must act to deliver positive outcomes for retail clients at every single stage of the customer journey. And that's across every single touch point as well. They need to take all the reasonable steps to avoid harm to customers. I'll talk about harm in just a moment. To be consistently acting in good faith with their customers, must consider and meet the needs of those who might be classified as vulnerable. And there's new deadlines that the FCA compliance have just put out, last year, and they are now around the corner. So if anyone doesn't know on the call, then the new and existing products that you have and the services that are open for sale or renewal by the end of July this year, so 2 months away, 31st of July, that is the deadline. And for closed products, so the existing products and services, the rules come into force next year. So we've got an extra year, 31st of July 2024. So if we just turn it into talking about the FCA's expectations for the firms right now, the FCA has a list of very specific expectations for any regulated business. Number one is they need to focus on delivering good outcomes. That's really what it boils down to, which are fair, valuable, suitable products. They're having good treatment. They're providing consumer confidence, and they're meeting the needs of all their diverse customers. Easy for me to say. They also want to provide products and services that are designed to meet consumer needs that they know provide fair value and help customers achieve their financial objectives, which do not cause them harm. And harm is described as offering value for money at the end of the day. They have been asked not to seek or exploit customer behaviour biases by lack of knowledge or characteristics of vulnerability, to ensure that the interests of their customers are central to their culture and purpose and embedded throughout the organisations, all the processes, and to monitor and regularly review the outcomes that their customers are experiencing in practice, and to take all the necessary action to address these risks to good consumer outcomes at the end of the day. So what are the challenges of managing consumer vulnerability? And we asked a couple of these questions in the polls earlier on, but If I look at the contact center world, again, it's, where my business has been, where we've been for, I've been playing around this area for 20 something years. But contact centers primarily rely on the frontline staff to identify vulnerable customers. We talked about training and some of the challenges around that. And, it's not always easy, though, for these frontline agents or the advisors to identify customers who are vulnerable. Not all of these vulnerabilities are clear. There might be subtle clues which are often missed. Traditional speech or text analytics tools, they just don't pick up on them. And many contact center companies don't have scalable systems in place for the tracking, the reporting, and the follow-up for every single customer. And they're not able to operationalize the insights or embed them into a much larger strategy. And this is one of the big challenges, that's coming around the corner right now. And the traditional programs that they've been using, they cannot provide advisors with the guidance and the coaching on the specific behaviors that meet the needs of vulnerability. Therefore, they're at risk of not being compliant because it has to be on every single interaction. So, as I work a lot with the analytics, part of our business, let's talk about how analytics can help. So analytics, firstly, that's powered by AI and machine learning, that's really important, can absolutely help your businesses successfully manage vulnerable customers. And let's talk about how that can happen. So firstly, it can accurately and consistently identify vulnerability on every single interaction. No contact is missed, by automatically remediating particular workflows, and also by preventing future mishandling vulnerabilities and complaints by training the frontline staff with targeted coaching. In short, analytics allows businesses to embed a fair treatment of customers into all of their contact center operations. So it's analyzing all of your customer interactions, as I said. So it's doing that every single time. The amount of companies I go to and they say, hey, we are already monitoring our customers and we've already got a plan in place, but they've got 500 agents. Those agents are taking 800 calls a month on average. That's 400,000 calls a month in total. And they're telling me they're listening to 3% of all the interactions that come in. So that's what, 12,000, give or take. So is that a good reflection, 12,000 of your 400,000? And that's really the question. That's really what the FCA is trying to look at. There is a bias there. It might be the wrong time, it might be the wrong day, it might have been whatever it may be. Certain agents, it's just not a holistic view. And that's really where the analytics is really looking at every single interaction in real time, every single day of the week. And it's also giving the business the pre-built dashboards as well. So it's actually giving the ability for the business to go and drill down and to go and understand how the business is working, how their interactions are taking place, and to double click into that and to actually make some business improvements. Again, audit trails. So when the FCA does knock at the door and say, hey, what are you doing about it? We are monitoring and we've made these improvements, we've actioned all of these improvements. That's really key. Having workflows that are triggered upon identification. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but workflows are really key so that actually what happens is a vulnerability. What if that agent did miss something? If the AI is listening to every single interaction, we can actually take action versus it being slipping through the net. The quality and coaching tools, again, that continuous improvement, probably very key for what Helen's doing with some of the customers, and then also the root cause analysis. So identifying vulnerable customers accurately and consistently. With the AI-powered analytics, brands can basically remove lots of the manual and subjective human analysis that they're doing today. And they can automatically identify and classify the FCA's drivers of vulnerability, as well as determine when an escalation event does occur and what the overall sentiment is for every single interaction. So firms are also able to provide the regulators the detailed and the reports, if need be, which are really effortless to produce. That's the great thing about technology. And brands can continuously monitor the trends by volume, by type of interaction, by the location of their customers, and a number of other factors which are really important and just give you that meaningful information to your business. Then you've got the ability to being able to automate remediation with workflows and dashboards. I talked about that just a moment ago. But what this slide is showing is a workflow dashboard that shows how we're automating the remediation process. So you can automate the distribution process. So as an example, a compliance officer would receive specific interactions for them to have to review. but they know exactly what is assigned to them. They can listen to those specific interactions, those calls or those digital live chats or asynchronous messages, and then they can act accordingly on the back of it. So it's really targeted. It's a workflow based on what the AI has identified. Being also able to upskill the frontline staff for future preventative measures and violations is really, really key. So with analytics, brands can now deliver a great customer experience, a great service by objectively identifying the skills that are impacting the compliance with the out-of-the-box dashboards, and are then able to sort of use these to deliver focused coaching to deliver improvement. So that could be real-time, it could be soft skill guidance, or it could be post-conversation in agent coaching. And this has been something that we've seen a lot of, with our customers. So they're using the analytics to, to drive, real-time guidance, having those soft skills of, how to drive more empathy during the conversation, how to speed up, slow down, how to listen more. So all of those great things is what the analytics can do in real time when listening and understanding what that conversation is about. But also when something has gone wrong, has been missed, or there are opportunities for improvement and flags, we can then go down and say, hey, Mr. Agent, Mrs. Agent, we want to have a conversation and we want to coach you and make it better. And again, that's part of what the FCA is looking for, is that continuous improvement, and the fact that we are monitoring, we're identifying, we're improving the business, and we are taking this really seriously. So understanding your vulnerability drivers, what is negatively impacting your business right now? Again, using analytics that brands are now able to auto-correlate the drivers of that vulnerability and all the trends across the channels and flag and address them, all the recurring issues, but with an early warning system. So, hey, something's just changed. We're seeing a trend at the moment and the AI's picked up on it, and we can now work towards it. We can nip it in the bud. So we've got a number of strategic customers who are working with us right now. We've got a number of big banks, we've got some insurance companies and some other regulated verticals who have all worked with us to address the FCA's mandate, trying to be ahead of the game, and they're using the AI-powered analytics to do that. So what I wanted to do is just give an example of a particular customer. They're in the motor finance vertical, and actually the FCA had already been speaking to them. They'd sort of knocked on their door, and a number of other brands, by the way, it wasn't just them they're being targeted on. And they were, this regulation was put on their radar. And as a result, they came to us, and we were speaking to them anyway, but they came to us as a result and wanted to, really obtain a greater visibility of their vulnerable customers and see how much they were unaware of. So upon us putting the analytics tool in place, which is out of the box, it's really easy to do, then Nice AI, the analytics, we uncovered 23% of their customers who were vulnerable that was previously unknown to that particular business. So we could identify the agent behaviors, we could see the processes of what they were following, the impact that this had to the customers, and then we drove all the coaching and the improvements from that data. So what that's led to is a huge positive result to show the increase in the sentiment scores for vulnerable customers. All conversations now being monitored and addressed, and are widely visible across their dashboards and their executive business. And the brand is now feeling great. They have a solution in place by the end of the July deadline, but they can sort of, sleep well at night knowing that them as a business owner, their leadership team, and also they're doing the best thing for their agents, giving the tools and the coaching. So going back to some of the questions that were asked earlier. So if I sort of conclude the AI excellent piece, there's a better way today to manage vulnerable customers. Leading organizations are already on this path. They're moving towards using AI to automate their programs. AI is making it possible to remove the human subjectivity to objectively capture and classify the FCA categories of vulnerability and automate the actions and the remediation of 100% of the interactions versus just that small sample we talked about earlier. And AI provides predictive, prescriptive insights with purpose-built models for the financial market, which are based on the largest syndicate CX database in the world. So that's really what we've been doing. And the models can also be customized to specific needs. So what that's doing is it's enabling you to find the instances of vulnerability as well as complaints, which are fast. We can quantify it, we can automate it, and we can treat it. That's basically what we're trying to do. And that's really the analytics platform that we have here at Nice, and that we've delivered for customers like I just mentioned a moment ago. So sort of to summarize and to sort of, talk about, next steps, and what I'd love to have out of it is that, NICE, it's called Enlighten, which is our AI capability for vulnerable customers. It's the only AI-driven predictive model that can automatically and accurately analyze and create a vulnerability score for every single interaction. Brands can now demonstrate to the FCA they are building a culture and an infrastructure to deliver the fair outcomes, which is mandated by Consumer Duty. And, as a result, we are offering brands the ability to test drive with a POC, a proof of concept, zero cost. What we'll do is we'll use data securely and present the findings and the recommendations and keep you in check for the FCA. And again, it is out of the box. It's purpose-built solution with a specialist team supporting. So I look forward, hopefully, to hearing from some of you afterwards. And I thank you, Megan, for the opportunity to speak to everyone today.
Well, thank you very much for that, Richard. Just going to start sharing my screen again. There we go. And we're just going to run a quick poll for anyone who would like to find out more about the NICE solution. And then Richard, just really fascinating to see what's in place in terms of analytics and how it can really support this quest towards getting better grips of vulnerable customers, and making sure that agents are getting the support that they need to. Okay, we'll just give that poll 1 or 2 more moments. There we go. And we're going to go on now to some more top tips and questions from the audience. So the question that we've had in from Natalie is, are you finding that although organisations have started training their staff on vulnerability, they have yet to put the governance in place to allow the advisors to be empowered to make decisions to properly support their customers? Helen, what do you think of this one?
Yes, I'm definitely finding that's the case. As I mentioned earlier, I consider the training to be the icing on top of the cake, and you need to have the cake in place so that those team members know, what the processes are, what the policies are, what they can do to best support the customers. Absolutely.
Okay, we've had another question in from Mandy. It seems that many businesses will need to increase headcount to ensure we have the ability to adhere to CD objectives. What if there is no investment available for businesses? How will this be viewed? Richard, do you have anything to add on this?
Yeah, it's the common question is we've seen people trying to put a lot more headcount behind dealing with that issue. So how do we listen to more conversations? How do we have more people who can do more coaching and can do everything? That's really the value proposition of what we're going to market with, the ROI behind it of, yeah, you can go and add 100 more people to your business and still not cover the 400,000 a month conversations we talked about just a moment ago. Or you can use AI, which scales, it's 24/7, it doesn't have a bias. It's not, Richard thinks this and Helen thinks that. It's actually that, the algorithm that's being used is the FCA's, rules and procedures. So that is the point of where AI is stepping in.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Hopefully that answered your question, Mandy. And we've had a tip in from Catherine. Advisors must be careful they do not treat all vulnerable customers the same. Different vulnerabilities need different considerations. And it's also important to recognise that vulnerable does not equal incompetent. Okay, Helen, I think this is where your game and different personas comes in.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm probably echoing Chris Fitch here. He talks about, what is that customer vulnerable to? My eldest son has got special needs. In a supermarket environment, he's not vulnerable at all. And yet when talking over the telephone and managing his finance, he's incredibly invulnerable. So it's, it's starting to understand, what is that person's circumstance? How is that impacting them? And do they need anything? It may be that they don't need anything at all from you as an organisation, but it's about having those conversations and finding out.
And Richard, is this another one that analytics can help with in terms of identifying what people are doing?
Absolutely. And some of the real-time guidance that we offer, it picks up on what that vulnerability is, and it starts to understand some of those soft skills of what the agent should be doing in real time as well. And that's been really key, and it's really complementing the program that we offer. Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, and moving on, we've had another tip in from Fiona. Listen out for small signs that the customer is vulnerable. This could be through sighing, vocal tone, specific words, language barriers, and repetitive questions. Helen, I suppose this comes back to training and those lists of things to listen out for and give an opportunity for people to say those things as well.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, just pick up on those small cues. I kind of consider these as like little puzzle pieces, little jigsaw puzzle pieces. So on their own, it may not be a sign, but it's starting to sort of think, okay, so that customer's behaved in that way, but they've also said this, and they're also, I can pick this up in their tone of voice. It's building those puzzle pieces together and then getting that bigger picture, and then maybe starting the conversation.
I suppose this is talking back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of that call listening and why that is so valuable, and at the training point that if you can listen to figure out these size, these specific words, you know, those repetitive questions, and see it and hear it on a call, maybe it'll then help agents be a bit more alert to it moving forwards.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we've had a question in from Fiona. It says, where the customer is vulnerable but also rude and aggressive to our staff, how do we ensure we are supporting both the customer and the advisor? I guess, Richard, this is another one where analytics could really help with those real-time prompts.
It does. It really does, you know, make sure that the agent is acting and following the right processes as well. And that's really key. I mean, again, you know, if a customer is vulnerable, rude to and aggressive, then depending on the business, you know, if I am a 21-year-old who's fresh out of university and I'm very early on, I'm probably not equipped to necessarily deal with that, even if I've had some good training at the start. So it's then making sure there is that process in place to pass them through as politely and as, you know, carefully as possible. Helen, you may have more, more insight into that than what I do, but yeah, it's a real fine line.
And so, Helen, would you say that it's having that conversation early on, that if someone is being rude, aggressive, it might be a mask for their vulnerabilities, or kind of parallel, and just making them aware that they shouldn't just be dismissing a rude and aggressive customer, put the phone down, really, that there might be something a bit bigger going on there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's almost like an iceberg, isn't it? You know, we see just a small portion of that customer through their behaviors. But actually it's what's underneath the water. You know, in my training, I talk about, you know, actually just park the anger to one side if you can. Try and see where that anger's coming from. It typically comes from 3 drivers: fear, frustration, pain. So, you know, if you can park that anger, see beyond it, you know, again, look out for those other indicators. But what is driving that anger? It might be frustration, because actually that agent isn't understanding what that customer needs. They're not listening. So yeah, park the anger and look at where that anger is driven from.
Okay, well, yeah, very insightful and great question, Fiona. Thank you for asking that. And we've had a tip in from Stacey that says, focus on empathy as a skill when training. It's key when handling an interaction. What does that mean? How does it make a difference? And why it's important to not be overly simplistic. Thank you for that one, Stacey. And we had another tip in from Fiona that says, tune into their emotional cues and reassure your customer by offering reassurance by acknowledging what they are saying. And so, Helen, that acknowledging and taking that time to have that conversation, you know, it's that quite deeply embedded in early doors training.
Absolutely. And I talk about the 3 V's in my training. That the customer wants to be visible, so they want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be valued. And they want to be validated. So yeah, absolutely acknowledge, you know, what is that customer experiencing? What are they feeling? What do they need? You know, just, yeah, acknowledge it and reassure them and validate.
Fantastic. And we've had a tip in from Steve that says, if you can arrange it, create links within your local community to care homes, day services, even local authorities, and allow staff time out to help them. By doing so, you can help your team to make the real world connection to vulnerability that can only boost their customer service skills. So for me as well, Helen, what this comes down to time, to my mind, you know, if they are stretched and taking a lot of calls, you know, it's a lovely idea to get everyone off the phones and go into a care home or something like that, but where's the balance there? How do you make that work over the year, say, so it doesn't put too much pressure on the people behind taking the calls?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of organizations maybe do just 1 day a year or 2 days a year, and it could be taken you know, over 2 half days or 4 quarter days. You know, it might be that they can leave you know, maybe at 2 o'clock on a Friday, and then go and do some volunteering. It's, you know, don't rule it out because of the time factor. Make the time work, because it's such a valuable you know, part. You know, we all need to be getting out into the community and volunteering.
Richard, have you seen any good examples of organisations doing this and making time for these visits and these volunteers?
Absolutely. I mean, I work and, you know, provide technology to organisations, but our company gives us 2 days a year, for example, as a minimum, where we can go and choose. But what we do, I mean, we're about 8,500 people, so it has a really big impact. But what we do locally is we try and think of certain, you know, things that we want to do as a small community and break that up so we can make a big impact, you know. So rather than me going and choosing something to do, there might be my team or a couple of teams that get together and do it. And all of a sudden it's a really good day out. And I'm not saying it's fun to go and speak to people, and, you know, but actually it is really good fun to go and, you know, go to a care home to help people, to do whatever it is, understand. But it also has a really good, you know, from an internal morale point of view, and also from a retention point of view, it's those things that actually, you know, we're there to help people, but it actually is helping us as well as individuals feel good. But it's also helping us to connect better with our colleagues. And we do see a really good retention, you know, lift, you know, when organisations do this.
Brilliant. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that ripple effect of the wider benefits as well. So yeah, to me, what's just been said is very much, you know, as much as it takes people off the phones and away from the organisation, you know, pays dividends to be investing that time and to see it as an investment for your people and your customers. We've had a question in from Samantha that says, when a service or product is unable to be adapted to meet the needs of a certain vulnerability, for example, health vulnerabilities such as dementia or mobility, how is it best to handle that situation with the customer when they're trying to purchase this service and aware of their vulnerability in that context? A bit of a tricky one, but about that over to Helen, if you've got anything to add on that.
I thought you would send it my way first.
We can give it.
Yeah, I mean, these are probably the most difficult, you know, when potentially that person doesn't necessarily identify as vulnerability or isn't happy to share that they have that vulnerability. And again, probably when they're trying to purchase this service, it could be just, you know, putting those friction points in place, like I said earlier. You know, sending the information through and just sort of saying, look, you know, I've shared a lot of information with you. You don't have to make a decision today. You know, take it away. I can pop it in an email to you. I can pop it in the post. Talk it over with somebody that you trust. And if needs be, we can set up a call with both you and the person that you trust. We can set them up as a third person, and we can have a 3-way conversation, and we can answer any of your questions. And, you know, that might be a really good solution. But that's what the FCA is looking for with regards to that appropriate friction.
Yeah. Okay, well, hopefully that answered your question, Samantha. Okay, and so we're coming up to the top of the hour now. So in 1 or 2 questions, if you can just put into the chat room, what did you like best about today's webinar? We've also got a winning tip, and that has come in from Fiona. Well done, Fiona. Their tip is to collate a library of best practice calls handling vulnerable customers. These are a really good training tool and bring to life the vulnerable customer for new starters. So well done again, Fiona. We'll be in touch after the webinar to sort out getting your gift card to you. And don't forget, on the way out of the webinar, just to complete the survey, it's just 3 questions long and really helps our webinars to be the best that they can be. And there's also the replay, and the slides will be available on www.callcenterhealth.com/articles/recorded webinars later this afternoon. And there's also time to register for our next webinar in the series, which is unlocking the latest WFM secrets, which will be taking place on the 22nd of June. And so all that's left is to say a massive thank you to our speakers today. Thank you so much, Helen, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us as well.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
And that's all. So thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.